You know that feeling when you feel like the rug has been swept from right beneath you, or when your heart sinks to your feet? That's exactly how I felt when I heard about the passing of Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball. I feel like I don't know what to say, but at the same time, there's so much I want to say. This wasn't a video I had ever planned on making, but it's one I want to make, because Toriyama and his work meant so much to me, and I would like to talk about why. First of all, I don't even know where to begin. This was all so sudden. On the evening of March 7th, we got the news of Akira Toriyama's passing, which happened a week earlier on March 1st. I was actually in the middle of streaming with Axel on her channel when I heard the news. I felt incredibly shocked. I feel like this man doesn't even need any kind of introduction, but in case you don't really know much about him, he's a renowned manga artist, best known for his Dragon Ball series. He's worked on more than just that though, such as Dr. Slump, which came out before Dragon Ball. Throughout the 80s and 90s, this man's work dominated Shonen Jump. His art style, sense of humor, and storytelling were all captivating to readers, both young and old. I first became familiar with his work in the late 90s when I was just a little kid. I think it was about 1997 or 1998. I was at a friend's house and he showed me the first episode of Dragon Ball Z. I admittedly wasn't too interested in what I saw, but a little while later in 1999, I stumbled upon Dragon Ball Z on Toonami's Midnight Run block. I remember it being somewhere in the middle of the Namek episodes, and I can't remember which one exactly, but there was just something about this show. The tension drew me in. The characters were captivating. Krillin and Gohan were a fun duo, and Vegeta and Frieza were actually terrifying. When Frieza pierced Krillin's torso with his horn, I felt sick to my stomach, but I couldn't stop watching. When Cell absorbed people, again, I felt sick to my stomach, but I couldn't stop watching. I actually had nightmares about that. And when Boo blew up the Earth, I really felt Goku's pain. I haven't seen a show that had made me so invested before. Akira Toriyama had created a world and characters that I held near and dear to my heart, and I wanted more. I was able to properly catch up with what came before Dragon Ball Z with the original Dragon Ball, when that started airing on Toonami in 2001. I saw a little bit of the original Dragon Ball before, but it was just a few episodes of the 1995 dub from Funimation's first attempt. But this time through Toonami, I was able to get a bigger and better feel of the characters that I thought I grew to know in the Z portion of the story. Here, I got to see Goku grow up. I got to see him befriend Krillin, who ultimately ended up becoming my all-time favorite character of the franchise. Seeing the humble beginning of Goku and his friends made me realize that this series is truly about adventure, friendship, and redemption. You know, before this point, I had never seen a cartoon that had characters age or actually die before. I was so used to American cartoons that were usually self-contained episodes, where everything would just reset by the next episode. Dragon Ball Z had an ongoing plot where characters grow older. I know Dragon Ball wasn't the first cartoon or anime to do this, but it was the first I've seen of this kind of storytelling. It really made me feel like I couldn't afford to miss an episode. As both Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z were airing on Toonami, I still wanted more of this world that Toriyama had created. 2 shows wasn't enough. I went online in 2001 and discovered that there was a third Dragon Ball show called Dragon Ball GT. This was not yet dubbed into English. Hell, not even the Cell arc had finished airing on Toonami at this time. Given that this was pretty early on in terms of the internet, there was only so much I could find online, but I did find ways to learn about the upcoming Boo arc, and I found ways to watch Dragon Ball GT. And alright, look, even though GT has some redeeming qualities, it is generally regarded as the worst Dragon Ball show. Sure, GT wasn't nearly as good as Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, and I know I'm not alone in that sentiment, which is largely attributed to Toriyama not being as nearly involved. It just really goes to show how valued his imagination truly was. At this point, if Toriyama wasn't involved, we didn't want it. And I just gotta say, Toriyama was involved in GT, but it was only for some things here and there, such as character designs. Some people think that he had no involvement whatsoever, but that isn't true. Either way, my point still stands. People wanted his name up at the forefront. Fans didn't just want Toriyama involved, no, that wasn't good enough. They wanted him at the helm. In 2009, when Dragon Ball Evolution came out, everyone pretty much despised it because it was so disrespectful to the original source material by Toriyama. Hell, even Toriyama was pissed off at this, so much so that it actually gave him the incentive to rework a movie that Toei was planning to release in the next couple of years, known as Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods. Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods is the first brand new major piece of Dragon Ball work from Toei, who previously left off 16 years earlier with Dragon Ball GT. Battle of Gods wasn't produced in the same kind of way that the films were that came before it. This one had Toriyama's fingerprints all over it. The film introduced many fan-favorite characters such as Beerus and Whis, and it overall kick-started the Dragon Ball Renaissance. Well, technically, one could say it started with Dragon Ball Kai, but I think it truly took off with Battle of Gods. Since then, we've gotten more movies and a brand new show, Dragon Ball Super, a midquel that takes place during the 10-year time skip after the fight with Majin Buu and before the end of Z. Even though Toriyama wasn't as involved as he was during the original manga's run, he still was incredibly involved, having a ton of creative input, and it was marketed as such. Shueisha, Toei, Fuji TV, and pretty much every other company whose hand was in the cookie jar wanted fans to know that not only was Dragon Ball back for real this time, but so was Toriyama. This wasn't another GT situation, nor could it afford to be. This was the next canon entry from Toriyama, 20 years later after the manga finished its run in 1995. With a property as big as Dragon Ball, the legacy it went on to attain not only during but especially after it finished, Dragon Ball Super had some pretty big shoes to fill. And because of this, a lot of fans tend to be torn on Super. Sure, sometimes it played it safe and was a little meta here and there, but it still really felt genuine, and I could really tell that Toriyama was involved. I really do think that it was a consequence of getting back into the groove of things and wanting to make sure that the franchise was as recognizable as possible to the average fan. So, when Super suddenly came to an end in 2018, I was shocked. Just when it felt like it finally found its footing, it was over, and again, I wanted more. And we got more, kind of. The manga continued, and it is still running to this very day, as a collaboration between Toriyama and artist Toyotaro. Dragon Ball Super Broly was the next film in production, and this time around it reworked a movie-only character from the Z era to fit into Super's canon, basically making him Toriyama-ified, for a lack of a better term. Before this, Broly was a very hit-or-miss character. Either you loved him because he was badass, or you hated him because he was so one-note. This time, he had more depth. This time, he had more character. This time, he was Toriyama's. And just as it had been proven time and time again, when Toriyama is involved, fans will be more inclined to eat it up, no matter what. So, besides Dragon Ball, what else is there? Akira Toriyama was actually an incredibly famous and wealthy man before Dragon Ball, thanks to his previous work, Dr. Slump, his first major manga serialization in Shonen Jump. A lot of English-speaking fans might not be as familiar with Dr. Slump as the rest of the world, as both of its anime adaptations were never localized into English. I first discovered Dr. Slump while searching for Dragon Ball information online in 2001, but it was incredibly difficult to understand what it was even about, given the nature of the internet back then. There was no YouTube or streaming websites, so even then it was pretty difficult to find clips of GT to download at the time. But I was able to properly see the main cast, such as Arale and Senbei Norimaki, when the crossover episodes happened in Dragon Ball. After that, I was able to buy the manga since it was licensed by Viz Media. And honestly, I love Dr. Slump pretty much just as much as Dragon Ball. You can tell that Toriyama was a man of humor, and he loved writing silly stories with cutesy designs. It truly felt like his main forte, almost as if it was just Toriyama writing for himself. If you love Akira Toriyama and the humor that came along with early Dragon Ball, I highly recommend giving Dr. Slump a shot. He has written so many other short stories, such as Sandland and Neko Majin Z, along with several one-shots that can be found in Akira Toriyama's manga theater. All of these I also recommend picking up and checking out. So, given that I've been a fan of Akira Toriyama's works for 25 years now as of this video, I can pretty much say with confidence that his work has affected me in pretty major ways. Without him, I wouldn't draw the way I do. Fun fact, even my Mugi Mallard Sona is based off of Toriyama's Bird Sona that was featured prominently in his early work. And most importantly, without Toriyama, I wouldn't have a set standard for what I consider quality manga and anime. Hell, the standard that Toriyama's work had set not only just affected anime and manga, but entertainment in general. Even if you've never seen Dragon Ball or any of Toriyama's other work, you definitely know the name Goku. I bet your grandma even knows Goku's name. You know what a Super Saiyan is. You know what a Super Saiyan looks like. You have felt Dragon Ball's influence even if you've never watched it, because it's gone on to affect movies, games, TV shows, music, and more. It really just is everywhere, and I love that about it. Seriously, Dragon Ball is popular all over the world, especially in Latin America. I've always admired how beloved Dragon Ball is there. For example, Mexico loves Dragon Ball so much, they even broadcast the Goku vs. Jiren fight as if it were a high-profile boxing match. It's just really fucking cool to see the world come together and love this world and its characters. So, where do we go from here? Besides Dragon Ball Daima to look forward to, there's also the Dragon Ball Super manga, which is still ongoing. I'm not sure what's going to happen to it now that Toriyama has left us. Will Toyotaro continue on his own, or will the manga begin to wrap up? Nobody really knows for sure, but I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. Without Dragon Ball, the anime and manga industry wouldn't be what it is today. Toriyama's works are often considered a gateway to anime, and it's for a good reason too. His stories require no real entry point, so you can pretty much just jump in at any time. Sure, it's definitely recommended that you start from the beginning with Dragon Ball, but there's a reason why you can just jump in with Dragon Ball Z and it'll still have you hooked. Dragon Ball Z was the Toonami show back in the day, and because of it, many kids such as myself who tuned into it also gave other anime on the block a chance. Besides helping boost the popularity of anime in the West, it also went on to shape the industry that we see today. Without Dragon Ball, we wouldn't have Naruto. Without Dragon Ball, we wouldn't have One Piece. The list goes on. While I wouldn't call Dragon Ball Z the grandfather of anime, because that just simply isn't true, Dragon Ball absolutely created the modern landscape of anime and manga, especially shonen titles. It's a very real possibility that the upcoming Dragon Ball Daima will be the very last work we get to see from Toriyama. According to the statement released from the official Dragon Ball accounts, there was so much more he wanted to do. So much more he wanted to create. And I think that's what tears me up the most about this. It's such a damn shame. This man's work was left unfinished, and unless there are some other projects the public isn't privy to yet, Dragon Ball Daima may very well be his swan song. This still doesn't feel real. 68 feels way too young. I seriously hoped he had at least another decade or two left in him. Man, this really does hurt. And I know I'm not the only one grieving his loss, either. This is truly a tragedy. I'm just grateful that Toriyama was able to leave behind such a large body of work that affected the world like none other. Seriously, there's so much content he's created that I'm sure will be loved for years and years to come. And even though Toriyama may be gone, his legacy will be known forever, and that I'm sure of. I know that for as long as I live, I'll always keep Toriyama's works near and dear to my heart. I have all 42 volumes of Dragon Ball, all 7 Dragon boxes, and several animation cells. I consider these to be some of my most prized possessions, and they'll all go on to inspire me for years and years to come. I'm not sure what else I can really say. His loss will be felt for a very, very long time. But this is also a reminder to celebrate what he has given us. Seriously, he's leaving such a legacy behind. And even though he may no longer be with us, his works will continue to entertain generations to come. This man is proof that you can change the world during your short time on Earth. Rest in peace, Akira Toriyama, and thank you for all you've done.